delightful co-host, Mr. Travis Croft. How are you, sir?
I am fine and dandy, and for anybody out there who is listening or watching on Twitch, you can enjoy my co-host disembodied voice.
So my camera for some reason is not working, but there you go. We have improved the service for you, ladies and gentlemen.
It was always all about me. We've just made that more efficient.
Exactly, and I like to think that eventually we'll actually just have this weird animated head for me.
Like Max Headroom.
Yeah.
There was a TV show here in Australia launched, I don't know, 15 years ago, where the host was like a virtual host. And they had like celebrities come on, be interviewed by this virtual host.
Okay.
You'd be unsurprised to hear this. It didn't do very well.
Well, color me surprised. The idea of sort of like animated head thing. Did you ever get over here Games Master TV show?
Don't recall it.
There was it's a kind of celebrity scientist, astronomer, I think he was, Patrick Moore. And he was like this really old, curmudgeonly, bald-headed guy that always had a monocle. And for some reason, they got him to host this games review and cheat kind of tactics show back in the early 90s. It was really weird, and it was all oddly digitized, and it kind of looked like what it looks like now when you look at something like GoldenEye or Doom. It's like, oh, yeah, that loosely resembles a face. But not really.
I might have to look this up on YouTube.
Yeah, it's a weird one that. Hang on, there we go. I'm just going to make Travis the big screen because my face can suck it.
Your camera says it's taken its ball and it's going home.
No, not today, thank you.
So it's exciting to be back this week. We had we took a step into the I guess the lesser known this week in the chain film. I took a risk with the 13th Floor. And George's disembodied voice has been replaced by a sort of a dark grey rectangle for your viewing pleasure.
All right, Travis, you are officially the face of the show.
we have tried turning it off and on again, just for the record. That's something we did do. We're not entirely clueless. We know a thing or two about technology around here.
Yeah, we do. It's powered by electricity.
It is an auspicious day. I actually have to go back into the office tomorrow for the first time in 7 months.
Good grief.
So, I mean, it's hard work, but somebody's got to buy overpriced coffees and $15 ham sandwiches, and that some have greatness, some are born into greatness, some have it thrust upon them, and that's my lot. That's what the universe has chosen for me.
Yeah,
$8 coffees and $15 ham sandwiches coming my way.
Ooh, doctor!
Exciting stuff. Did you celebrate Invasion Day this week?
Yeah, by working. And it was really busy. I don't know why people seem to enjoy shopping on Australia Day. And, Shay always says, why? No one goes shopping. It's like, oh, that's so sweet. You've never worked Australia Day retail, have you? People go shopping. It's tragic, it's horrible, it's pathetic.
And she's not really a shopper either.
No, but I did have close to an argument with someone who decided, with no sort of like warm up to the act or anything like that, she decided that she was going to berate me because she said, oh, you people want to change the date because you're all ridiculous. Why can't you just keep it the way it is? It means nothing. It's ridiculous. I was like, I didn't even say anything about Australia Day. What?
Hang on. So she was upset at the prospect of people changing the date?
I think so, yes.
And I think she was celebrating this auspicious day by going shopping.
Yes.
Australia for you, ladies and gentlemen.
And apparently she thought by the portion of my face and body that she could see, that I must be one of those types of people that is protesting it and calling it Invasion Day and all of that stuff. It's like, okay, you know what? I approve of changing the date, absolutely, but I only said hello to you.
I mean, anyone who could look at you would know you're essentially a radical.
It's true.
I mean, only a radical would refuse to show his face on the internet like you. It means you're obviously a part of Antifa.
Well,
Um,
I've had a few suspicious phone calls in the late evening, so I figured it's best to hide my face for a little while.
I think so. He would have this man, disembodied voice accompany me tonight. Would have a very thick ASIO file as a result of his.
I am even considering having a robotic voice to stun all of the robots.
Is there really any evidence that he actually exists? I mean, I haven't seen him since last February. So, I mean, and, there just happened to be, a biblical storm, which prevented us from actually recording the show live back then. So, he knows people who can organize sorts of things. So, your radical ideas about Indigenous reconciliation aside, should we get onto the actual topic of a show people allegedly tune in to hear about?
Are you saying that we should actually do something that is mildly related to what we're supposed to be talking about?
I mean, we don't want to get sued for false advertising and people like, hey, I tune in for random conversations about films that don't really make very much sense and forget to tell me what they're about. I don't tune in for topical conversations about current events and reconciliation and that kind of thing. I don't want to get educated listening to these podcasts.
On that note, ladies and gentlemen, let us start the show proper. So this is Armchair Producers episode 98. I am here with Travis Croft. I am George Terran. We are going to be talking right now about our chain movie of the week, which is The 13th Floor. Now, this was one that, Travis, you picked because it was one that both of us saw, but we haven't seen it since it was released originally or something like that.
Maybe at least 20 years.
Yeah, it was released back in 1999, and I wonder which one came out first, because I think 99 was when the first Matrix movie came out as well, right?
Indeed.
Yeah, because obviously when you look at the trailer for The 13th Floor, there are a lot of similarities. And we are going to continue the new precedent of last week, ladies and gentlemen, by giving you a little bit of a synopsis ahead of the conversation.
Radical. I told you he's a radical.
I know. Computer scientist Hannon Fuller has discovered something extremely important. He's about to tell the discovery to his colleague, Douglas Hall, but knowing someone is after him, the old man leaves a letter in the computer-generated parallel world his company has created, which looks like the 1930s with seemingly real people with real emotions. Fuller is murdered in our real world the same night, and his colleague is suspected. Douglas discovers a bloody shirt in his bathroom, and he cannot recall what he was doing the night Fuller was murdered. He logs into the system in order to find the letter, but has to confront the unexpected. The truth is harsher than he could ever imagine. Dum, dum, dum.
Yeah. So I did take a bit of a risk here. We've kind of been playing it safe with really high quality productions of late. But I mean, it's not against the possibility of it. I could like something that's actually really high quality because I am a grumpy old curmudgeon. It's kind of my thing. But I would have thought this one was this or Existence, and I came down on this one because just because this is an interesting film in the sense if we look at the audience critic split. So if we look at the IMDb score, it's got a 7.1 out of 10.
Yep.
Versus a Metascore of 36.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting split between the two of them, whereas I think Existence was a little bit more in line of the two. And I recall liking this film a lot when I first saw it, as it was a really interesting, one of the first films I could recall that kind of did that what is reality kind of thing.
Yeah.
And you're right, The Matrix did it. It did it better. It did it first. It came out in March. This came out in May of 1999. Though, in fairness, this is based on a fairly well-known novel in that kind of world, Simulacrum 3 by Daniel Galouye, which was also, as I mentioned last week, was a previous film in the 70s, a German film called World on the Wire, directed by Rainer Werner Fassbender. is a significantly better film than this one, but
Mm,
unfortunately is almost impossible to find legally
mm,
unless you buy a shiny plastic disc from somewhere.
mhm.
So I went with this one. But anyway, so but the Matrix isn't based on the same book, so I
No.
feel it's fair to say that the influence is noticeable.
Oh yeah, yeah, and I kind of feel sorry for the 13th Floor because this it's always interesting the fact that so many times in years there are like dueling projects that are so very similar, and this is another indicator of that. Got one that was very inspired by Japanese cinema, particularly a lot of anime and manga, with that high fantasy science, not high fantasy, sorry, high science fiction kind of notion. And then this one, the 13th Floor, which again plays with that sort of realm of bit of a pseudo murder mystery kind of
Bit of a
thing.
noirish mystery.
Yeah. And but then it decides, no, we're going to fully invest in this kind of sci-fi element of it and go down that route. Um,
It doesn't really pull it off, I think, is the first thing
no,
from my perspective. As I said, I recall liking it.
yeah,
I liked it significantly less when I rewatched this the other day.
mm, mm,
From the start, in the sense that the cast, parts of it are good. Armin Mueller-Stahl, I think, is pretty good as Hannon Fuller
mm-hmm,
/ Grierson.
mm-hmm.
Plays a couple of different characters. Vincent D'Onofrio is always good.
Yep.
And he kind of does that sort of Jekyll and Hyde kind of thing here. He does so beautifully. So
He strangely reminded me, in the version of him with the long hair, kind of reminded me a little bit of Philip Seymour
yeah, I can see
Hoffman.
it. A little bit of his character, say Twister.
Yeah, and it's like, oh, okay,
A little
that's
goofy, but good, but goofy, but harmless.
yeah,
Yet he played also. So I guess one thing to sort of give you some context of what we're talking
mm,
about here is in the artificial in the AI or the VR world that that Hannon Fuller has created. There are characters or NPCs, you might want to say, inside that VR world who are based on his colleagues and friends.
yeah,
So Craig Bierko, who plays Ferguson, I think that's his character's name in the main world,
yes.
and he has a doppelganger in the VR world called Douglas Hall.
No, it's the other way around.
Right, other way around. So
Yeah,
anyway, they have each
yeah.
person has a doppelganger in the other world. So Vincent D'Onofrio is a developer, I guess you could say,
Mm-hmm,
who works for Hannon Fuller and Douglas Hall, and
mm-hmm.
he has a counterpart who looks the same, but is obviously who's a bartender inside the VR world called Jerry Ashton. So if you look at the IMDb page, you'll see many of the characters play two or more characters because they have counterparts in the virtual world. Now that's why I was sort of saying D'Onofrio is sort of played this goofy, goodwill, good person, sort of harmless kind of guy, harmless sort of geeky developer.
A little bit of a almost like a slight stonery vibe to him. That like, oh yeah,
he's kind of almost channeling a little bit of his private his character from Full Metal Jacket a little bit in this sort of the psychotic side.
Yeah.
In his Jerry Ashton character, which is kind of nice. I love Vincent D'Onofrio is awesome, always awesome. But Craig Bierko, as soon as I saw him in his first scene, I'm like, oh, they got the dollar store Ben Affleck.
That's so true.
You know, like you got the haircut, the Affleck haircut. The picture, you look at that first shot of him, you're like, oh, they couldn't afford Affleck.
Yeah.
I have no idea. I should note whether Affleck actually was, they chased him. But I mean, Craig Bierko is to basically be the film's star. He really hasn't done very much before or after. So he was kind of I don't think he's much of a leading man. And I think he's kind of weak in this role.
Agreed.
And I think if he'd had someone like Affleck, and Affleck was doing good work in the late 90s, Good Will Hunting into, Dogma with Kevin Smith and some of that kind of thing. And Armageddon, if that's your thing. He would, I think someone like Affleck actually would have slotted into that role perfectly and done a much better job. Gretchen Mol, who was kind of the it girl of the 90s. She had a bit going on.
She had a moment, didn't she?
She's actually a fine actress. If you haven't seen her, just as an aside, in the Betty Page biopic, with Notorious Betty Page, she plays Betty Page, and she's wonderful in it. And I think she's solid in this without having a whole lot to do. And I guess the other main star here is Dennis Haysbert, the president from 24, playing Detective Larry McBain, who has seen Seven one too many times. And he's really Dennis Haysbert is again a very good actor, but not given much to work with here.
No, he's really not.
It's like in one of the first scenes, and they're kind of explaining to him what's going on. And this is line goes like, they think, they work, they eat, and then he goes, they fuck, and I'm like, no,
yeah,
that's not good writing. And it is written by the director, Joseph Rusnak, and Ravel Centino Rodriguez, two household names if you've ever.
Oh yes.
Joseph Rusnak has done some other stuff. The other writer hasn't done anything else. But I should say, probably the only thing he's done, Joseph Rusnak, that I've actually seen, he was the second unit director on Godzilla.
Yep.
That's not a great advertisement.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's a German director. He looks like a lot of the stuff he's done since then has been German. But like their writing is not good to start with. I think they've chosen they've cast poorly in a couple of key roles, particularly in the Craig Bierko in the lead role, and they've guys who can act aren't given a lot to work with.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Which, is kind of indicative of the whole thing, because visually, when you compare it to the fact that it came out a couple of months after The Matrix, which when you look back on it today, it still looks great, and it had that very, very definite, purposeful look to it throughout the whole thing. That slight green tinge to a lot of the shot, and the integration of the CGI and the simplicity of and the almost brutality of jacking into the Matrix versus the weird laser light show that floods the entire office. I don't know why they need it that big.
The plot doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So Hammond Fuller needs to send a message to Douglas Hall, who is his I guess co-owner, co-developer, co-founder of this organization. And to do so, he chooses the most convoluted, bound to fail way of doing it. Right? He leaves a message inside the VR. With one of the NPCs. Whereas, I wonder if he was familiar with phone calls. Email was a thing in 1999. I was sending emails.
You see, he did leave a phone call, but it got deleted. But then conveniently, after it kind of needed to be resurrected as a story thread, somehow, even though I don't think anyone has ever been able to do it in all existence, undelete from a voicemail machine. Somehow he manages to recover it. It's like, okay. Huh?
Yeah. It happened because the movie needed that to happen, I guess.
Yes. Yes, it did.
And so he's gone to this great trouble to leave a message inside the VR. And the other part of that doesn't make any sense to me is we're given the indication through dialogue that Douglas has never used the VR before.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, my God, Hammond's actually been using the VR. He's been in it. What do you mean he's using it? Oh, my God. How do they know it works if no one's using it? Yeah.
It really doesn't make sense, because the first time he kind of comes back out of the machine after they Vincent D'Onofrio made such a thing of it's not safe to be in there for 120 minutes. It's like, okay, yep, that's fine. It works. It's like, oh my God, that's amazing. It's like,
have they not tested this before?
Yeah.
It looks pretty deeply developed. It's like,
yeah.
for them to have actually not play test if it's supposed to be a game, right?
Yeah,
You get
and
play test. I mean,
if they know that 120 minutes is dangerous, then
how?
surely they must have used it
Yeah.
for a little while.
How did they determine this? And I guess again, if you're going to leave Douglas a message that you want him to see because it's very important that he see it,
Mm.
why would you put it in the VR system when he's never used that before?
Yeah,
It doesn't seem like a very obvious place for him to retrieve a message that he's. How is he? I mean, it was kind of a riddle about how he'd put it there anyway. It wasn't very clearly explained, but Douglas just seems to know that that's where it is. And oh yeah, well I'll just jump in and go and get it.
yeah. There are some really interesting ideas in this movie, though, and like that notion of having someone within a virtual reality world read this thing that gives them the impetus to go and test the boundaries of the game, so to speak. That's a cool concept. And if they had actually gone, you know what, let's really fake everyone out and just sell this as a straight up film noir, and just have everything set in the 1930s, but then like 2/3 of the way through the film, we cut back to their world, the modern world, and then it's like, whoa, what? And then the eke out right at the end, it's like, whoa, it's a layer on top of a layer? That's fucked up. But that kind of storytelling, you would need someone like Chris Nolan, who played with this kind of in reverse for Inception.
There was a real Inception vibe to this, wasn't there? I mean, you have to imagine that Nolan is familiar with either of these films, World on a Wire or 13th Floor, or the book potentially.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised because like you said, there's so much of that now typical trope nature to a lot of these films, and anytime that there are stories that involve kind of warped reality or reality sitting on top of another one, there are a lot of those stereotypical things, like the notion of taking over someone's consciousness or downloading into another computer. Those are very, very typical tropes. So I feel like, but in this movie, whereas with something like The Matrix or something like the Inception movie, where it feels like it's fresh, it feels tired kind of straight away in this. It's like,
it's confusingly written. Yeah. I mean, it was done better than this in 1993 in the Star Trek Next Gen episode Ship in a Bottle.
Yes.
And that's a 1 hour television show.
Yeah.
Which apparently wasn't based on the same. It didn't have that same source material, which again is kind of very well known and well respected science fiction novel. But in one 90-minute episode on a television show, they did a significantly better job telling a very, very similar story.
I think part of it is that this movie also treads a lot of water and doesn't really do anything for a lot of its time as well. And it's an hour and 40 minutes, and it's like, okay.
It felt long. It felt long for 100 minutes. You're right. And they spent a lot of time on Gretchen Mol's character and her growing relationship with Craig Bierko. And I think, no spoilers here. It's a 21-year-old film. If you're getting spoilers, then but the love story between the two of them didn't need to happen. Didn't need that. No. Could have been. You got to slice some time off. I mean, towards the end of the film, there's some fascinatingly brilliant scenes here. I particularly like the scene where, so to give a little bit of background for those who are playing at home, Gretchen Mol's character turns up after Armin Mueller-Stahl's Hannon has been murdered and claims to be his daughter, Jane. And she's staying in an upmarket hotel, and she's very classy and educated and claims to be, looking to inherit the company, blah, blah, blah. She has a growing relationship with Craig Bierko where she actually manages to alibi him to prevent him from being arrested for murder. Yeah. Later on in the film, where she disappears, and Douglas Hall's character finds her working as a checkout chick at a supermarket. Obviously, a very different persona to the one she'd portrayed, and she doesn't recognize him. And I felt like maybe this is one of the things that really sort of stuck with me and why I liked it initially was the reveal in that moment is quite. Oh, that's cool. What's going on here? I'm not really sure where they're going with this. I'm fascinated, and they managed to hook me back in at that moment.
Yeah, agreed.
But then after they kind of do it again in a couple of minutes with someone else, and you're like, okay, now you kind of lost me.
Yeah. So I think all in all, this was very much an antidote to the quality that we've been watching for a long time. I feel like
worth a try.
Yeah, I think it's definitely worth a try, and I think that part of me thinks that this movie could be remade.
I've had the same thought. I mean, the source material is still extraordinarily strong.
Yes.
And I know I'm raving on about it, but if you do have an opportunity somewhere, people, to see World on a Wire, I do strongly recommend it. It's actually it's a longer but much better film than this, and the ideas underneath it are still strong.
Yes,
and absolutely. It could be really cool. And I like your idea if you could just play it with a straight bat.
Yeah.
All the way through. I don't know it needs to be in the war. You could do it at any time period, you know?
Yeah.
It would be. It's a bit like when we watched Monster Squad all those years ago.
Yeah.
It's a great idea, done kind of badly. I'd love to see it done well.
Yeah. Absolutely agree with that. Absolutely agree. Now, what are we going to do for our next chain movie?
The ball's back in your court. I think I did two. Or did I do one? I can't remember. But either way, I think it's I think the ball's back in your court.
Well, I am going to follow Vincent D'Onofrio, and I'm going to give you a choice between two movies, and both of them are old classics that have a lot of offshoot potential. So we could either go with D'Onofrio's turn as the villainous bug in Men in Black, or we could go the Tim Burton classic Ed Wood, where he
Ed Wood.
Ed Wood it is.
I hate the Men in Black films. I never liked them.
Okay, Ed Wood it is.
And I just happen to think Ed Wood is probably my favorite Tim Burton movie.
I'm probably there with you. Probably there with you. So it's going to be fun. I haven't watched that Ed Wood in a couple of years, so it'll be good to go back. And as I say, we've got one hell of a stellar cast involved in that. Obviously, you've got Johnny Depp, possibly his most potent. You've got Bill Murray in there wonderfully. You've got Sarah Jessica Parker before she became ridiculously horrible and just I can't stand her. It's obviously got Tim Burton, so we can go some unusual directions there. I mean, we've been trying to work out how to get to Pee Wee Herman for a while.
I think didn't we do Tim Burton last year when we did Sleepy Hollow?
Yes, we did.
I think you're missing the obvious connection point here. The very obvious point to follow for this film is George the Animal Steel. And to WrestleMania 2 is the obvious choice.
No, we're not going back to WrestleMania 2.
God damn it.
Because
you're right, it's not a great WrestleMania.
And I'm sorry. I would have to make sure that the connective tissue for if we do go to any old school WrestleMania, we do need to follow Hulk Hogan to Suburban Commando.
It would be doable. He's in all of them. Let's note that George the Animal Steel did do other feature films, including one in 2010 called Boston Girls, which has a 2.3 in IMDb.
Oh,
and it starred Danny Trejo. So, you know, it could be done. It could be done. I'm not going to say that's what I'm going to do, but I'm going to enjoy. Going back and watching Ed Wood, in which, of course, he plays Orson Welles.
Yeah, Orson Welles in a very beautiful, underwritten, perfectly played scene. But we'll get to that next week. Now,
I feel like that was shorter than we normally spend on something. It was kind of watching it, and I was going to go, I feel like it's going to be a short discussion on the 13th Floor this week. It was kind of...
Yeah, absolutely. It didn't engage itself with me to kind of want to talk about it, and the flaws in it weren't super egregious either, so it's not like...
It was just sort of forgettably dull. It was just kind of mediocre.
Yeah. Speaking of mediocre... I'm just going to do a quick catch-up because I did tease it at the end of last week, and I'd totally forgotten that I had smashed my way through it. Mandalorian Season 1 and 2, ladies and gentlemen. That's right. I watched all of it. and my position on it stands. It is perfectly fine TV with pretty good production value, acting, everything is all fine, but it's absolutely the cream of the crop. If you want something on in the background, that's what this is TV. It's like, okay, yep, sure, that's it.
You weren't entertained?
Not really.
You're not entertained?
I was kind of trying to be entertained. Like, it's like I want to be interested in this, but
I don't know if you're not interested in this. I just think you should just check out a Star Wars altogether, because
that's what I've done, basically.
This is what I don't understand how you can not like this if you still like the originals, because this is everything
this
the
isn't
originals
like the
made.
Originals.
Sorry?
This isn't like the originals.
I think it really is the originals. It's inspired by the same kind of things. There are entire episodes that are. Do you notice the episode in season 1? It's basically a 30-minute remake of a Seven Samurai.
Yeah, but that was kind of good in parts, but then it's like, all right.
I'd say
I've
that was
seen
the best
better.
episode, by the way. It was a fine episode. So like, it is everything that Star Wars was. It's inspired by the same sort of thing. It has the same feel to it.
Yeah, I just feel like
samurai movies.
Yeah, I just feel like it's great for people who haven't watched a lot of the source material that inspired Star Wars and grew up with Star Wars before there was just a mass influx of all Star Wars all the time. And they're just not making it for me anymore. The last thing that someone attempted to make for me in Star Wars was The Last Jedi. And that was, okay, this is really cool. It's not a Star Wars movie, but they're trying to do something different and do a different kind of storytelling in space. That's kind of what I want. I don't really want any more Star Wars. Like, I was talking to a friend the other day about Futurama, and a friend of the show, Richard, how you doing, man? He said, "Oh, I always want more Futurama." And it's like, part of me does, but at the same time, I don't want any more, because the creative team behind it, who created Disenchanted, they've obviously changed. I don't think they'll be able to pick up where they left off with that level of quality, and it's just not for me anymore. So like, that little microcosm of Star Wars is great, and in many ways this is typical Disney produced stuff. There is not really anything wrong with it at all. It's good production value. They know what they're aiming for, and they hit it absolutely. It's just not for me. It's just not for me.
I don't understand this at all. I don't understand why a Star Wars fan would want The Last Jedi, but we've had that conversation many times. I don't understand why this can't be. I don't understand how this isn't enjoyable to a Star Wars fan.
It's not unenjoyable. It's just kind of something that I don't want to really. I don't feel I need to pay attention to. I have no connection. I feel no connection to The Mandalorian. The subsidiary characters are more interesting to me, but none of them are given really enough time to particularly develop. And the show
because they're all getting spin-offs.
Yeah. So I'm sort of like, okay, this is fine. I see why people like it. I'm happy people like it, but I'm not going back for season 3. No, thank you. There's plenty of other average TV out there to watch, and far more important things for me to be watching and doing with my time than that. And that's fine.
Difficult man to please. You're extraordinarily difficult to please, because
I still stand by Grogu, Baby Yoda can get fucked.
I never really bought into that. I give you that. I thought that was, in many ways, as soon as I saw that, I'm like, merchandising.
Yeah.
Baby Yoda, the flamethrower.
I will pay that the very obvious Deus Ex Machina of the last part of season 2 and the cameo of who comes in and saves the day. The way that they filmed that and finally revealing, kind of showing off an element of the badassery of that character that we didn't get to see in Star Wars movies, that was well done. And it's
I
like,
think that was almost a highlight for me, though. I'd had that spoilt for me because I'd seen people crapping on about it on Facebook for weeks before I got around to watching it.
Yeah.
And like I said before when I reviewed it, look, I strongly disagree with my co-host. I think he's being extraordinarily harsh on this. But as he said, he's not digging what Star Wars is. I mean, it's not doing it for you anymore. But that moment alone is exactly what was wrong with the sequels. That was That was what we wanted to see. We didn't want to see sad, old, pathetic Luke, farting around on some planet, tossing his lightsaber away. The lightsaber chuck away instantly DQs Rian Johnson from ever touching anything like this ever again. The worst moment in the trilogy.
See, I loved that. I loved it because it just went, nope, go this way. And trying to show you something different about the characters.
Different for different sake. I mean, pick the things you want to be different about. And there were some cool moments in that. Like I've always said the moment where Laura Dern's character jumps ship into the kamikaze ship is like fucking sick. But Rian Johnson obviously doesn't care for the IP. He's obviously a Star Wars fan, and to do that to one of our most beloved characters, and basically turn him into a pathetic old man. Yes, it was different, but did it work for the vast majority of people? I would say no.
No, of course not.
So, I mean, why do something like that? Why do something yes, it's brave, but it's also stupid. Why destroy characters people love?
Yeah, even when it was first announced that Rian Johnson was going to direct it, so I was like, where he's an incredibly talented director and he knows how to create his movies, but no, that's not a good match. That's not a good match. And
I'm not dissing him. I thought he was. I liked Knives Out. I am pumped they're going to do another one of those.
Yeah. It was. I don't know what they expected getting Rian Johnson in. We've done this
ad nauseum. They obviously had no plan. Whereas what they should have done is gone, here's the beats you need to hit. This is what JJ's written. You need to say this. You need to say this. In between that, you can do your funky shit. But then again, I suspect you don't get Rian Johnson if you tell him, here's the beats you have to hit. Rian Johnson goes, I don't make films that way. I'll go and do my own thing. But for me, at least, that scene where we saw what Luke could be, just Luke being a badass, right? Exactly what we wanted in the sequels, even a little bit.
That's one of the things is this being set when it's set and having a younger Luke where he is going round and gathering together Force-sensitive people to try and rebuild a Jedi Academy. That's a cool story in and of itself, and it should have been done straight after the original trilogy. Straight after, so they could just keep him going and go, yep, we're Luke Skywalker is just going to be shown as a badass as we are getting better and better and better with CGI and with special effects so that we can just really showcase him. They missed that boat, and it's like, okay, let's do it here because I didn't. It's still like fake face, and it's really why didn't they get what the fuck?
You were so right there. That special effect was so not finished.
Why didn't they get the guy who plays the Winter Soldier, Sebastian Stan? They could have just got him in because there've been people for years at this point saying if they just gave him a little bit of makeup, he looks like a young Mark Hamill, and they could have just done that. And he's already under the Marvel banner. They could have said, yep, whoop, just pop in there for a little bit, just body double. We'll do a little bit of CGI on there. If people like it, then maybe you can continue being Luke Skywalker for a TV spin-off series that we're probably thinking and trying to do.
I didn't like the Princess Leia effect they did in, what was that, Rogue One?
Yeah.
I thought it looked crappy. It kind of looked like, the human faces you'd see in video games about 15 years ago.
Yeah.
So I was like, I don't like that. And I know a lot of people thought it was a nice gesture, and I know her family said okay. Yeah. But I thought, well, at least if they're going to do it in the future, because that was, 5 years ago now.
Yeah.
Surely the tech's got better since then.
It really
hasn't. We've gone. I have to imagine that they were just like, we needed another 2 or 3 weeks or something.
Yeah.
on that special effect, and they just said, "Fuck it." They obviously had CD Projekt Red running the show, and they said, "Fuck it, ship it."
Ooh, jabs at CD Projekt Red.
Because you are 100%. I'll give it to you there. That was lame, but that was. I'm sorry. I know it's a lot of fan. People have said it's a fan service. Is it not fan service? I'm sorry. We the fans made the franchise what it is, and giving us a little bit of what we want isn't even a lot of what we want isn't a bad thing.
No.
You can do both, right? You can still challenge us, Mr. Ryan Johnson, and at the same time not insult us, which is what they did with what they did to most of the characters from the original series in the sequel. So aside from the special effects, which were god awful. God awful.
But
what do you think of the idea? I mean, I feel like I know what the answer is, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What do you think of the idea of a Boba Fett spin-off?
I don't care.
Right, yeah.
I really don't care. It was kind of nice to have Boba Fett show up and have him kind of bring it in. And again, I think that there's some interesting stories that they could tell with old Fett, and his partnering up with Ming-Na Wen's character. My God, I don't know if there's more of a poster person for Disney employee in movies and TV than Ming-Na. She's kind of been in everything at this point. But the way those two were kind of showcased and revealed throughout the series, and then how they worked together, that was kind of cool. And it's a great introduction to these characters in a way that we never really got any character development or character personality, so to speak, with Boba Fett in the original movies. He was just sort of like, that guy looks cool. He has a couple of killer lines, and he died like a bitch.
Yeah.
There's really interesting story going there, but I don't know. I don't think that's the kind of stories that people would want. I think that now, considering the bizarrely retroactively kind of popular but not really prequel trilogies, the sequel trilogies, and a lot of the other stuff in between, Star Wars is now run by the fans who are our age, and they are all so gunning for the original canon books, like the nods to Thrawn in the series. And Thrawn is fucking awesome bad guy, and awesome novels, and a lot of Knights of the Old Republic kind of stuff coming in as well. And it's like, oh, that's all really cool. And it's like, okay, who's actually directing this now? Is it a creative person with one individual story that they're trying to tell, or just someone who knows a lot of shit and is trying to weave all of that together in a mystical pattern that then makes the Star Wars universe make sense and understand? And everyone,
I think we talked about it the other week. There are two different camps, in Lucasfilm at the moment. And on the one hand, you've got the Favreau camp, Filoni camp, and on the other one, you've got the Kathleen Kennedy camp. And all her cronies. And, on the one side, we've got the Mandalorian here, and we've got the Boba Fett spin-off. I guess you could put into that campus now as well. On the other side, you've got the sequels, which are, done for now. And then you've got, I guess the Patty Jenkins one, and the Leslie Headland one as well. I don't know exactly where you'd put the Taika Waititi to the film show. I can't remember.
There's a lot of Star Wars.
What he's actually working on there, who knows? But I think we've got the two camps there, and you're right. They don't necessarily mix because, from what I understand, we talked about this when I talked about the Mandalorian. A lot of the stuff that's in there, a lot of the references are to the Clone Wars, for example. A cartoon which I've never watched. So that kind of held me back from really being terribly excited about some of his characters.
And Rosario Dawson, I always enjoy her. She is always a delight to watch, and she clearly has some kind of personal investment in Ahsoka. because you can just feel it as soon as she's on screen. But at the same time, it feels like we're going to kind of get a little bit of that annoying age gap issue with the Ahsoka character, like what we did with Luke Skywalker, where unless you watch the Clone Wars, where she's introduced and she is revealed and the story kind of follows her, Rosario Dawson's not the youngest person in the world anymore. So being able to showcase her as a true badass is gonna be just technically, production-wise, just harder to pull that off. And it's like, oh, okay, what about those middle years? Why didn't we get those middle years? Which is, timelines are just not hooking up well, and it's really frustrating, I'm sure. Oh, I've lost Travis. I don't know whether I've lost me.
No, sorry about that. I said I don't know if she's getting her own spin-off series or not, but I know the fans were very excited about that.
I think she is, but I don't know.
I think everyone's getting a spin-off series.
You get a spin-off.
Andrea has asked us on Twitch if we are actually live, and we are actually live. Do you think we would sound this unprofessional if we rehearsed?
That's true.
But definitely live. How to tell if you're actually live? I don't know what else I can tell you. We are very, very live. If it was edited, it would be totally slick. And
yes, because we have all the time in the world to script this shit.
Yeah, like it's this level of genius only comes from doing it off the cuff.
It's true. It's true.
But anyway, so I think it's probably predictable that you haven't really enjoyed what Disney have done with the property for a while.
Yeah. As a rule, Disney are not really inspiring me in any ways. They're doing fine stuff, is how I always put it. And there is one. There is one show that they are producing that is a true breath of fresh air, and will change.
Oh, nice segue
to WandaVision. Episode 3 came out a couple of days ago.
Something we agree on.
Yes. Now this is, as I said, a breath of fresh air on the TV landscape, especially during this COVID, where so little is being produced. That is ongoing shows, like you think about stuff like The Witcher, you think about Stranger Things, you think about The Boys. All of that's on hiatus and waiting and production and delay. This is slowly but surely coming out, which is annoying because I just want to get to the end and find out everything that has happened, because it is beautiful at planting seeds throughout each episode. I love it.
And I'm going to stay angry for a tick. And I've seen a lot of people, and in fact, people I watch on YouTube I quite respect, have sort of gone, oh, the first 2 episodes were so boring and they're just too heavy on the sitcom elements. I'm like, finally they get something interesting happening in the 3rd episode. And I'm like, I guess we kind of covered this last week, but oh my God, if you don't get what's going on with this show, stick your head in the lawnmower or something, because, like, seriously, you got no hope. It's so good. The first 2 episodes were such a slow burn. And finally, in the 3rd episode, we land in color. Yay. We're now in the 70s, I guess. Sort of Brady Bunch-esque sort of vibe to this one. And it's also really started to go off the rails, I think, this one a little bit. Like, whereas I felt like the hints, the little subtle hints that things weren't. I mean, I guess we always knew they weren't right, but the little hints about things being kind of weird were more subtle in the first 2 episodes than this one, which is it just slaps you around the face with it, and particularly with the character of Geraldine.
Yes.
Now, I think and I'm just going to put my hand up and go, this show is full of Easter eggs, 95% of which I'm not getting. I get the really obvious ones, like we have one last week, a watch advertisement that had Hydra written on it.
Yes.
Like, Hydra. I understood that reference.
No, that was it was Hydra Soap or something. The
Hydra Soap was the one this week.
was the watch. Yeah,
the watch was last week, but I got the Hydra references both times. It's 2 in a row.
Yeah.
But then there was the character of Geraldine, who sort of turns up in the neighborhood. Elizabeth Olsen is suddenly pregnant in this episode.
Yep.
And is very quickly progressing through the stages of pregnancy. And
Yep.
Geraldine, I guess, is a friend from the neighborhood who just sort of came out of nowhere. And she has a little pendant around her neck with a sword on it.
Yes.
I don't know if you picked it up. Now,
Yes.
I feel like, well, that's something. That is something I should know what that is, but I don't.
And that is, so that icon also appeared. It was on the side of the little red helicopter that she found. There is obviously if you didn't watch all of it and it was very touch and go, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., you know about the the S.H.I.E.L.D. initiative and all of that stuff. And it's, there's the kind of a shadow organization variation of it, which is S.W.O.R.D. So you have Sword and Shield. And so there have been a few references now, I think maybe even an episode so far to S.W.O.R.D. And there are some theories out there that when S.H.I.E.L.D. was basically infected by Hydra, that same thing happened to S.W.O.R.D. So this could be a continuation of the Hydra element of that. Wow, Andrea says she's never actually heard of WandaVision.
You're in luck, Andrea says if you're watching The Mandalorian legally, you should already have Disney Plus, and that's where you will find WandaVision.
And kind of going a little bit off the sort of thing that I was looking for Mandalorian and what WandaVision does so well. It is doing very different things with these established characters, and where Mandalorian is very straight-laced about what it's going to deliver, this is really morphing things, but in a nice, subtle way that is not too intrusive for Died in the War MCU fans, I think. Obviously, bit of hurdle for some of those real action lovers for the first two episodes, but even they seem to be coming around. And the evolution through time of the TV sitcom setting of WandaVision is kind of indicative of, as they get sort of like into that, like, I'm really hoping that the 80s themed one is kind of, it's got a visual aesthetic of sort of like the Bill Bixby Incredible Hulk show, and going that kind of ridiculous expression of superpowers. I think that would be a fantastic little tie-in. I think that would be really, really great.
I think the one coming up in a couple of weeks, the next couple of weeks might be the 80s one. I'm thinking kind of a Full House feel.
Yeah, just looking at that, the fluoro, yeah.
But I'm just excited to see. I'll pay that. I'll pay that. This is doing things that this is kind of the opposite of what The Mandalorian is, in the sense The Mandalorian is harkening back to past glories.
Yes.
So whereas this one has the freedom to, we talked about it, so they've got the freedom now to do different stuff, to do weird stuff you're setting your show in a 50s sitcom, which you'd never get away with if you were in Warner Brothers doing, DC characters, because they just haven't earned it. And unfortunately, the Star Wars universe hasn't earned the right to do stuff like this yet either.
Yes.
But I mean, I'm very, very glad that the Marvel guys have. Andrea, you're not a huge fan of comic crossovers. Do I need to care about the Marvel universe to like this show? I think that would help.
Yes.
I think it would help significantly. So, for example, there's a particular scene in this where Wanda's talking about what happened to her brother, or it's asked about what happened to her brother by one of the other characters, and they say, won't spoil it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I haven't heard that mentioned in an MCU film or property for a very long time.
Yeah.
So it was actually kind of the ugly duckling of the Avengers films that we're talking about. And it's the one we don't talk about because it wasn't quite as successful or popular. And to you, Andrew, if that line comes in at the end of episode 3, you might just sort of go, who's that?
Yeah.
If you haven't seen,
I would say for stuff like that, you could probably get through by kind of doing some research on Wikipedia and things like that. But if it interests you, if you are engaged by it, I think it is also a very good opportunity to go back and watch all of those Marvel things, because it's not tied into any of the TV shows. It is exclusively on the movies. Certainly at this point, there have been no strong references, or you'll get this if you watched Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. nudges.
I think pretty much that stuff's kind of like the other shows aren't being talked about anymore.
Yeah,
at all.
Yeah. There is rumor that Charlie Cox might be coming in to do a cameo for the next Spider-Man movie as Daredevil, which could tie in the Marvel shows on Netflix. But that is in the future. No one knows. Currently, nothing to do with WandaVision. I would say it's worth giving it a try. If you really feel a strong dislike to episode 1, you're probably not going to enjoy the rest of it, and wait until the rest of the show has been released. You're not going to want to just wait around for, maybe it'll get better. Just
and if we believe what we hear about this, that, like, for example, word on the street is Evan Peters will be making a cameo in the show as Quicksilver,
which brings in the X-Men side of things.
And again, if you know a fan of comic book movies, you're going to go, "Who's that guy?"
Yeah.
Whereas we're going to go, "Oh my god, it's the guy from the X-Men films." And and then we're really going to start to get into really complicated, because that's not the guy who played her brother in the last movie.
Yeah.
But
it was infinitely more popular version of that character.
But you're gonna struggle. I think that probably goes to anybody who's sort of tossing up watching it, but you're not really up to date with the you must be really behind the times, Andrew, if you haven't seen Werner Herzog in The Mandalorian. I thought he was in episode 1.
Yeah. But it was nice to see someone like Werner Herzog in The Mandalorian.
I'm seeing in the trailer, I'm going, that guy sounds like Werner Herzog. Oh my god, it is. What's he doing in Star Wars? That was exciting to me too. But I'm with you. And this is I think this is the best thing the MCU's done in many a year, and I'm excited if this is the prospect of the kind of thing we're getting now. What are they going to do now with Loki? What are they going to do with the Winter Soldier and Falcon?
This gives me a lot more interest and excitement for the next 10 years. I just read your message, Andrea, trying to poke us towards something that you'd really like. But yeah, we'll get off this soon, I promise. And if you've got some suggestions on what you'd like us to watch, anything that you've seen that maybe we haven't, put them in the chat, and we'll add them to our list of viewings. Any other thoughts on WandaVision, though, Travis?
No, I'm actually, I think he's got a good suggestion. If you can actually wait until it's all over, because I just want to know what's going on now.
Yeah. It's really annoying having to wait.
And I'm not interested in fan theories. I don't want it spoiled for me.
I've got my own theory of what's happening, but if my theory comes through, it'll be really weird and really cool, and it could possibly happen because of how weird and unusual WandaVision is presenting itself to be. But at the same time, I can't see them going that weird. But we'll see.
You should write it down somewhere and put it in an envelope.
Maybe I'll tell you off air.
Yeah. And I can actually attest to the fact that he was right. It's happened before.
Now,
your superpower is ruining films, right?
Guessing the ending far too soon. Now, I'm just going to do a quick little nod before I pass the torch over to you entirely. For anyone who has ever thought there is even a slight nugget of interesting possibility in the Twilight saga, it kind of turns my stomach to say that it is a saga, but that's how they call it. That notion of vampire councils and things like that, and anyone who has got a love for Anne Rice and a lot of the originals and that kind of show. There's a new show out. Well, relatively new. It's season 2 has only just started releasing, and I'm watching it on the streaming service Binge. It's called A Discovery of Witches, and it's interesting. It's got Matthew Good, who probably most people know him as Ozymandias from the movie version of Watchmen, and
Aussie Teresa Palmer.
yes, Teresa Palmer, who was in I Am Number 4. She's kind of been knocking around in a few projects. Like she was really quite charming in the delightful kind of B movie Warm Bodies. And she
also used to date a guy who ended up playing football for Hawthorn Football Club. So,
well, there you go.
They broke up, and then he came and played for Hawthorn, and he won us the grand final. So, thank you, Teresa.
Andrea loved Russian Doll and did like the Umbrella Academy. 2 shows.
I really like Russian Doll.
Yeah, I really liked Umbrella Academy.
I thought the first season of Umbrella Academy was good. I haven't got around to the second one yet.
Second season's good too. It does some interesting stuff. It kind of it does a few things. But on with Discovery of Witches. So the general premise of this is it is kind of your quintessential human vampire romancy thing. They're both professionals and they find this magnetic attraction between them. But what this does is it's taking things a bit more seriously, and it's not sparkly vampires, and it doesn't make the vampires fucking pathetic. Matthew Good is fast becoming the new generation's Jeremy Irons. And it's funny that Jeremy Irons played Ozymandias in the Watchmen TV show last year or the year before now. His voice, the way he delivers, it is so fucking Jeremy Irons. And when you have someone doing Jeremy Irons or being Jeremy Irons, you think of those characters, there's always that imminent threat. It's one of the reasons why he's so good at the voice of Scar in The Lion King. And the way that he portrays his vampire, it's really good. He is charismatic, he is charming, but you can't help but kind of go, oh, he's probably going to kill me as well. But he's Englishly charming. And then the way that they bring in other creatures as well, it's just interesting. I smashed through season 1. I've started going with season 2 just last night. And it's quite paint by numbers, but it's trying to do different things with the characters, as well as the big thing for me in it. I'm jumping all over the place, I apologize. There are 3 creature factions in the show. There's vampires, there's witches, and there's demons. And for some reason, it's becoming more and more difficult for vampires to sire new vampires, for witches to be born. They're not as powerful as they used to be, and demons are going insane as they get old. And there's a lot of different factions going on, but there's a conglomerate, essentially, of heads of each of these factions come together trying to maintain balance so that the wars don't rage and things like that. And it's an interesting way of kind of depicting it. It's not the most common kind of depiction of that fantasy world, which has become so tropey. And it's nice to see people trying to do different things. I think that it's probably going to lose some of that uniqueness, and I think it's going to go very safe, standard vampire, human, witch TV show kind of thing. I have a feeling that it's not going to have legs, because unfortunately, when you look at any of the kind of author responses to the books that this is based off of, E.L. James is the one that consistently being used. And E.L. James was the fan fiction writer from the Twilight stuff who did 50 Shades of Grey series. And it's like, that's not a high praise. Oh dear, that person is not a good writer. Not inspired by great writing. Oh. But this has got the generally better reviews overall as a book from other sources as well. But geez.
Feel free, Andrew, to drop your questions in. It's fine. You might have known this is kind of a stream of consciousness here.
Yeah.
We don't stick to a script or a run sheet. We did that once; it didn't work.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of
more fluid than you.
Conversational is the word we use. Just drop them in, and we'll get to it.
Yeah. We'll try our best to answer, but usually I just look at things on YouTube.
It's a one train's traveling north at 220 kilometers an hour. No, if it's that kind of thing,
isn't
you're correct. It is not our 98th episode on Twitch. Not.
Yes, it's true. So that's my early thoughts and all over the place review of season 1 of Discovery of Witches.
The British production.
Yeah, and James Purefoy, one of my personal favorite actors. He was in I can't remember the character's name, but he was in John Carter of Mars. He played Solomon Kane. He's been in a few things, and you kind of look at him and go, "Oh, that guy." He was the really rich guy in season 1 of Altered Carbon a couple of years ago. He is apparently in season 2, so I'm looking forward to see him vampire it up, because I think he could be interesting. Now, Travis.
That's all I'm about to say about that. I think it's pretty obvious that show couldn't be less for me.
It is not a Travis show. It is not a Travis show. Keep away. Keep away.
Trying to think of the last vampire thing I actually liked, and apparently it was the one that everybody else hated.
What was that?
It was in a hotel room in Japan, and it was on, and we missed our checkout time because we were so invested. It was a Dracula movie. It was the first one, Dracula Untold, I think. It was the first one that was going to be part of a Universal.
Oh, yes. That's on Netflix now.
Movie universe thing of their monster universe. And I don't know. I watched it at the time. We actually were annoyed. We had to quit watching the movie, get on the train, travel for 3 hours. And as soon as we got to the next hotel, we bought the movie package again just so we could watch the second half. Dracula Untold. I think that was the last vampire movie I liked. And apparently everybody else hates it. So, go figure.
Oh, well.
What I was going to check out, so to segue completely clunkily into something that's sort of scary-ish, I got around to watching a film. Do you have previous work elsewhere? Did you switch to Twitch? What do you think so far? This, Andrew, is nominally a podcast that we've been recording via a couple of different names for about 6 or 7 years now, I think.
Yeah. Maybe even 8.
Could be that long.
I've officially been in Australia for 10 years as of last week.
I was thinking about that the other day because it was Australia Day you came, right? I remember we had Australia Day.
I came just before Australia Day, the 21st.
It would be, I reckon, 7 years because it was Tusk. After a screening of Tusk that you and I decided to do this, and that was released in 2014.
Yeah, there we go.
You can find us. Obviously, we are the Armchair Producers. You can download the podcast from the usual places: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, if you're an Apple person. The various other places, I guess. You
can go to frightbrainproductions.com and you'll be able to get all of the Armchair Producers stuff. And I think there might even be some of the G&T podcast stuff still up there available. It might have been archived though. But
may I ask you a favor? I'm going to talk about this film for a second. As you have a man with the powers of answering comments, pop the link in the chat.
Oh yeah, I can do that.
I can't do that. I may be the star of the show, but I don't do technical things. George does the technical things. I'm the talent, obviously. There we go. So you can jump on that page and you can find some of our previous podcasts. So I think I don't know how long we've been doing them via video. I'm guessing it's maybe since mid last year.
Yeah.
Anyway, so a film popped up in my Facebook memories actually, but I'd shared the trailer about a year ago. And I thought it looked pretty cool, and then I had completely forgotten about the film actually existing until I saw it pop up in my Facebook memories, and then I went out of my way and thought, let's see if it actually got released and was it any good. And that film is Vivarium from 2019, starring Imogen Poots, who is a familiar name to me, but I couldn't exactly say why. She hasn't done a whole lot. And probably the more recognizable name here is Jesse Eisenberg, who he, of course, of Zombieland fame. He also, of course, played Lex Luthor in a couple of the DC films. He played Mark Zuckerberg in The Social Network.
Now You See Me.
Very well known. He counts. Imogen Poots, no, she was in 28 Weeks Later. She was in Green Room, which is an excellent film. But yeah, so she's got one of those faces and names, but they are our main stars. The synopsis: a young couple looking for the perfect home find themselves trapped in a mysterious labyrinth-like neighborhood of identical houses. This film does not have a good audience rating. It has a 5.8, and it has a Metascore of 64, which is just a little bit better. I guess to cut to the chase, I really liked this film. Okay. This is another British film. I don't know how they afforded Jesse Eisenberg. He may have been slumming it. It is based on a previous short film written by the director and writer Lorcan Finnegan called Foxes, which you can watch on YouTube, and I did. So we have the two characters. Imogen Poots plays Gemma, who is a school teacher, preschool teacher type thing, and her husband partner / fiance, I guess, Tom, played by Jesse Eisenberg, is a gardener / handyman. They are, as I imagine, is a fairly common sort of thing that young people do in Britain. They are struggling to find their first home, what they can actually afford. If you live there, you can have first-hand experience about trying to find property in and around London. That's not.
Yeah, I've got half a kidney left. That's all.
Anyway, so they go into they walk into like a real estate agent type office, which is manned by a really creepy guy named Martin, who offers to take them to show them the new estate that his company is pimping out, called Yonder. And they follow his car into this estate, and he shows them around number 9 in this particular estate. And you go in one door and out the other, and he turn around and he's disappeared. They go at the front, his car is gone. They get in their car and try to leave. They cannot leave. As it sort of indicates in the synopsis, it's a labyrinth, and they literally cannot get out. They run out of petrol before they get out of a neighborhood. No matter which way they go, left, right, straight, whatever, they always end up back in front of number 9.
Okay.
And before you know it, they've run out of petrol.
Okay.
They spend the night in this house. The next morning, they wake up. There's a box outside full of food. The day after that, there's another box outside. This time, there's a baby boy in it. And there's a sign on the box that says, "Raise a child to be released." And we start to follow their plight as they raise this child. And this child who ages at an inordinate rate. And as the child gets older, we start to learn that this child ain't probably human. He looks human. He doesn't act like it, though.
Okay.
Humans do not age at that rate, and he's just something a little bit off about him. And as the child gets older and more things start to happen, it starts to take a really interesting turn about exactly where they are and what's going on. To a point where it really escalates towards the end, when Gemma attacks the now adult child. So I should have given a spoiler alert. Anyway, that's not giving away too much. This is I don't know. This says comedy, horror, mystery. I didn't get the comedy part. Maybe we could put that on there because Jesse Eisenberg's in it.
Yeah.
It's a very subtle little horror film. And I think it's applying a metaphor. The way I was reading the film is a metaphor for adulthood. That maybe isn't quite so subtle, but we know anything that's even not, it is remotely subtle generally goes over, over my head, being a complete nonce like I am. Subtext and that sort of thing, that's not my jam. But that was sort of how I read the film. At the same time, it does sort of provide a real level of really creepy atmosphere the deeper we go down the rabbit hole and find out what's really going on, or start to suspect about what's really going on. It's a dark film. It's dark. It is not something you want to watch if you're having a bad day.
Okay.
But I really, really enjoyed this. It stuck with me for probably a good 24, 48 hours afterwards. And I was sort of thinking through it again and again and just reanalyzing what I'd watched and sort of trying to think if I'd actually picked up everything that was in there. And I was almost tempted to watch it again. But I had to watch the 13th Floor instead. So, it's one that certainly went under the radar. It probably would have got, I imagine, a cinematic release in places around the world if it had, if we hadn't been released in the middle of COVID. But it is available to stream in Australia.
What channel was that?
Let me just double check. You can rent it or buy it now on Apple or the Google Plays.
Okay.
I think so, yeah. From memory. So that's where in other markets, check your market, right? It's different in every country. But I would strongly recommend Vivarium. It's a really great little film. I'd be very curious to see what the director does next. He's got an interesting style.
Yeah. I've always enjoyed Imogen Poots as well. She's developing into a very good actress, bringing in some interesting performances. So, yeah, I'll give that a go.
I'm not sure if I'm not really sure I'm doing it justice, but it's really, I found it very creepy. I mean, just the idea, if we use the metaphor of, you desperately find a house and you kind of end up being isolated in that house of a child. And then once the child's grown and old enough to do its own thing, your usefulness on this earth is questionably over.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very brief metaphor for how a lot of people see life.
Yeah.
And a lot of things that society tells us about what life is supposed to be. I'm not sure our film director here and writer necessarily agrees with him.
Okay. And do you want to talk a little bit about Zoe's Extraordinary Playlist, or do you want to wait until you've consumed it?
I can give it a quick edit, but I've only watched one episode so far, so I'm hardly deep down the well on this one. So this one's available to stream in Australia on Stan. And is a young woman discovers she has the ability to hear the innermost thoughts of people around her as songs and musical numbers. Interesting idea. So it's Jane Levy as Zoe. And the only other actress, we got Mary Steenburgen plays her mother, and the other noticeable actress in here is Lauren Graham, who of course played Lorelai in the Gilmore Girls. Don't ask me why I know that. And while Jane Levy plays Zoe, who is a computer programmer in San Francisco, or a coder in San Francisco, and her father has a medical condition, a brain aneurysm or something that sort of left him, needing assistance to live. And she's a little concerned that she might be having the same problem because she's got headaches. So she goes for an MRI. While she's getting the MRI, they're playing Spotify music in the MRI machine. And there's an earthquake because it's San Francisco. And that goes haywire and somehow manages to downloads all of Spotify or something into her brain. Magic happens. And now as she's walking down the street, as it sort of notes, she can hear people's remember the Gilmore Girls thing, because you've met any woman anywhere. I may have had an ex-wife who actually binge watched all 7 seasons of it, like multiple times. And yeah, but I actually may have started out going, I cannot believe I'm watching this, and at the end, I cannot believe she didn't get together with Luke. I
am gleefully ignorant to all of that.
Funnily enough, it's decent television. It's a little bit quirky. It's a little bit different to what I expected it to be. But anyway, Zoe's Extraordinary Playlist. Zoe will walk down the street and she can almost hear someone who is having a bad day singing Help by the Beatles in their head. and
Okay.
it turns into a song and dance number with everybody in the street doing this coordinated song and dance routine to Help by the Beatles.
Okay.
And you are part of me was sort of going initially at this point, going, well, hang on a second, what exactly is going on here? It's like you ever remember the Mel Gibson film What Women Want?
Yes, I remember that. I'm thinking this is a bizarre combination of What Women Want and Once More with Feeling, the Buffy the Vampire
A little
Slayer.
bit, yeah, a little bit. And so, like, she can hear their inner thoughts as a song or a music, or something like that. But then everybody in the street starts turning into a big dance number, and then all of a sudden the dance number's over. They stop and they walk away like a flash mob. I'm like, well, what exactly is going on in Zoe's head at this point in time? Like, is she like transmitting those thoughts to the other people? Like, what are those people who get in a big dance routine? What do they think about what's happened?
When these dance routines happen, do they come to the end of the dance and kind of realize that they've been doing it?
Like, do they realize they're in the middle of a street now? There's no cars.
So they don't explain that in the show?
No.
So it's just dance routine, move on.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so, as I said, I've only watched the first episode.
Okay.
And I should just be upfront and go, I didn't hate this, which really is unusual because it doesn't sound like the kind of thing I would normally watch.
Yeah.
And the thing he's talking about sounds awful. And you know what? The first 10 minutes, I'm like, I think this might be awful. It got a little bit better from there. I guess the first episode's about Zoe really sort of into wrestling with her new powers / abilities, what do you want to call it, to detect people's inner soundtrack, for want of a better term. And she starts to try and use it for good. In a sense, she connects with a workmate who she walks past his office one night and hears his inner soundtrack playing Mad World by whoever that was by.
Gary Newman.
No, it wasn't Gary Newman. It was somebody like that. She sort of realizes despite being really sexy and cool and smart, he actually was having a hard time himself. And she manages to connect with him on an emotional level and actually help him. Tears for Fears. There we go. And there was the cover wasn't by them. The cover of it was the cover from Gary Jules was the guy.
Gary Jules, yeah, he did it in Donnie Darko cover.
Donnie Darko. And anyway, so as the episode goes, she starts to sort of wrestle with those powers, and like I said, her father is paralyzed because of a brain aneurysm or something like that. I wasn't paying attention.
Okay.
She has a scene with him where, she talks to him about, how she misses being able to talk to him and, bounce ideas off how he was a rock. And now he can't talk to her anymore. And she manages to sort of reconnect with him mentally through his inner soundtrack. Okay. And it was True Colors by Cyndi Lauper. It was the song he did.
Okay.
And it just sounds like the show's trying to do everything. Andrea says it sounds like the show's trying to do everything. I mean, it's still trying to. The first episode is the pilot, so in fairness, it is finding its feet a little bit. And I guess that kind of scene with her father really kind of didn't say it bothered me, but it was kind of like, yeah, I know exactly what you're trying to do, and it's a bit of you're pulling the heartstrings moment, right? Like, her paralyzed father is up and dancing with her singing True Colors by Cyndi Lauper, and you're supposed to forget, it hasn't earned, yet. I don't care about Zoe and her dad yet. Maybe it needed to.
I was kind of wishing that you were going to say the song that she heard was Simon and Garfunkel's "Sound of Silence."
Yeah, something of that nature. I don't know. Like "Fuck the Pain Away" by Peaches would have been fun. I don't know. There's so many funny things one could do.
Big question for you here.
Yeah.
Is it actually funny? Because
No.
it's saying that it's a comedy, drama, musical on IMDb.
It's funny in a way. I was just going to say, did you ever see this show with Zooey Deschanel called New Girl?
Yes.
That wasn't funny, but it's kind of felt it kind of got a similar vibe to this.
I get you. Okay.
And so I certainly wasn't laughing. And it was, the comedy was pretty hackneyed in parts, and
it's kind of endearing.
Endearing is a strong word. Look, I just kind of, I didn't hate it. I guess I started to like Jane Levy's character Zoe. I liked her.
Okay.
Her neighbor is played by Alex Newell, who plays the character Mo, and they've got a kind of a love-hate relationship going. I'm kind of enjoying their relationship. I can see her best friend. He's interesting. Her best friend is a guy named Max, played by Skylar Aston. And all the way through the episode, I'm like, is he gay? Is he the gay best friend? If he is, that's kind of cliche.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think he is. So I guess that's where the show's going next. Well, that's where the show is going next, because at the end of the episode, he does a song and dance routine to I Think I Love You.
Okay.
And you go, okay, well, that's where we're going next. It's so I guess I'm not doing a good job selling it. It's absolutely not the kind of show I would normally watch. It's absolutely not for me. It was recommended to me by a friend who said they haven't watched an episode yet without crying. So maybe, not being sexist here, but if it was a female friend of mine, maybe it will be a little bit more targeted at the female audience. Maybe it's more targeted at people who like musicals. You know how much I love musicals.
You keep on saying that, but you have watched a good few in this last year, sir.
Only one of those was as a result of a bet. Thank you very much.
It took years to pay off.
But I paid it.
Now, apparently, it started something.
I did it. Yeah. Look, so it's certainly not my normal content, and it's not. I don't think it's this time its target audience, but it was passable. It was pleasant enough, and I feel like the characters. I had enough there that I'd potentially, if I'm really desperate, I might go back and watch something again if I've got nothing else. I mean, I kind of chose it today because I thought it might be an interesting thing to talk about, considering I respected the person who recommended it to me. Yeah, it's all right. It's all right. It's okay. I mean, it certainly does make looking. I mean, the other thing that always goes through my head when I see a show like this is it's set in San Francisco, as I said, and she's a young coder, if you want for a bit of a term, computer programmer. And she lives in a fucking awesome apartment. It doesn't seem to be terribly far from work.
They always live in awesome apartments in these shows.
And San Francisco is one of the most expensive cities on earth, where if you earn $100,000 US a year, you are under the poverty line.
Yeah.
Like, I have a friend who lives up the road in Sacramento, which is, an hour and a half away, I guess, 2 hours. And house prices in Sacramento are going nuts because people can't afford to live in San Francisco anymore, so they live in Sacramento and commute. So, I mean, this says a lot about the kind of things I'm thinking about when I'm watching one of these shows, because that's absolutely not what I should be thinking about. I'm thinking, how does she afford such a nice apartment?
Well,
it's like when you watch Friends and you're like, how the fuck do they afford that apartment? I've been to New York. No one lives in an apartment that big.
I did enjoy the fact that they kind of never actually explained what it was that Chandler did. At least that was, they made a joke of that scenario. Whereas most of the other shows, like you mentioned New Girl before, it's like, okay, none of these guys are actually really rich, and they've got a huge loft apartment. Huge. That kind of space in New York? No.
It's worse than London. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's worse than London.
So anyway,
Andrea was just asking what you thought of Queen's Gambit, because you watched some of that.
I did like the Queen's Gambit quite a bit. We talked about that probably 2 months ago. You haven't got it. Do you still have Netflix?
I do, yes. I do plan on actually getting round to it at some point, but you did bring it up, and Andrea brought it up. Russian Doll. I haven't gotten around to watching that, so that is going to be on my list. That is one of the things that I'm going to watch, and I'll talk about next week for sure, because I like that kind of show. It was
good and interestingly, it's written and directed by Leslie Headland, or created by Leslie Headland, who, as we mentioned earlier, will be doing a Star Wars thing movie show or something of that nature, which released supposed to be a female-centric Jedi story, if I recall correctly. And on the one hand, I'm not going to get back into the Star Wars rabbit hole. But just to say, I'm very skeptical of anything that comes out of the Kathleen Kennedy camp. But I really liked what she did with Russian Doll. So, but the Queen's Gambit was a lot of fun. I think it's all about Anya Joy Taylor, who is a wonderful young actress, and she really inhabits that character beautifully. it looks incredible. The costuming and the sets and the direction is amazing. And I think at the time we talked about how it did a wonderful job making chess look interesting and exciting, which it really, really isn't.
Now,
Why haven't you seen chess movies?
I just realized something. You said the wonderful triple Kathleen Kennedy Club is club spelt with a K.
Oh, I'm not going there. I'm not making. I do not want to get cancelled.
Cancelled from our own show.
I'll get cancelled on Twitter. I'll get cancelled everywhere. There'll be like people, like we got one person on here this week asking questions for the first time ever. Next week we're going to have like 400 people on there telling us we're Nazis or something if we go down that rabbit hole.
We haven't actually said the thing. I just said what was it spelled?
Oh, I know what you said. You know, you don't want to take any chances these days. Have you met these people?
All right. Well, I think on that note, we should end this show this week. Thank you so much, Andrea, for sticking around with us for so long. Do appreciate it. And the question,
if you're listening to the audio version of this, and you're like, "Who is this Andrea person? Why are they asking two questions?" You too could be just like that and ask us live questions.
Yeah.
Look for the stream on Twitch. That Fried Brain is the channel on Twitch.
Yes.
Or you can. I'll try to remind my co-host that we should put the Facebook link in the
it's facebook.com/friedbrain productions,
and there'll be a link on there every week saying when we're gonna try and go live.
And to give the little bit of a teaser rundown for next week, we are going to be going on with our chain movie, which follows Vincent D'Onofrio from this week's 13th Floor to Ed Wood. We go live, Andrea, usually 7:30, 8 o'clock on Wednesdays, like we did today. Depends on how good or bad traffic is for me, usually whether I actually get home at 7:30 or we push it to 8 o'clock. Next week, I am going to be talking about Russian Doll, even if it's just a couple of episodes. I will also talk about another new show and one that is the latest attempt at bringing Terry Pratchett stuff to life. It's called The Watch. I watched one episode, and I will watch another one just to give a little bit more in-depth on that. Andrea, we are in Melbourne. Well, Travis is in Melbourne. I'm about an hour outside of Melbourne. We always do this digitally now because, my God, COVID made that so much easier.
Actually, so we've been doing it since way before COVID, I should know.
Yeah, and answering your question earlier, Andrea, if you go to friedbrainproductions.com, you can go into the G&T podcast chat section there, and you can go all the way back and watch or listen to the audio. We don't have video for them all, but it goes back to apparently 12th of January 2015. G&T podcast, The Journey Begins. Yes, that is 8 p.m. Melbourne time. Yes.
So whereabouts, Andrea, in the United States are you for our information? But about would probably put it at about bloody 4 a.m. somewhere in the States. It's a late night, I'm sure, and early morning wherever you are.
Yeah.
And it's actually probably a handy reminder. Sometimes we do talk a little bit more in terms of like Australian streaming services. We have to remember that our American friends, Washington DC, where all the action. 5:15 in the morning over that way, I would imagine. And what an interesting month you guys have had.
Yeah, it's been a roller coaster of a start to the year for you all. Travis, any teasers on what you might be watching next week?
I've got no idea what I'll be watching next week.
There it is, ladies and gentlemen. Proof that we do not script it. We don't even know what we're doing.
Sometimes I just sit around on flicking through like streaming services, looking for something, going, "Will this be interesting to talk about this week?" And you go, "Oh, it's another true crime show." Ooh, and you're like, "No, that's really not going to be very interesting." So I haven't had a chance. I'm actually dog free for the first time in about 6 or 7 months right now. And potentially maybe I'll do something saucy like go and see a movie myself.
Goodness.
At the actual cinema, not the drive-in.
And just so everyone knows, we started this chain movie thing, Andrea, and to anyone else listening, shut up, Archimedes! You can't come into my room. He's clawing at the door. Apologize for that. We started this chain movie thing where we go from connective tissue from one movie to another, themes at least. Back at episode 60, episode 65. May 18th, 2020, where we started with Streets of Fire. And we have gone through some interesting movies. There you go. August 2020, we had Tim Burton's Sleepy Hollow. So barely not even 6 months. No, it is 6 months.
Andrew, yes, we are quite fortunate here in Australia to have kind of got the old unspecified virus of unknown origins largely under control. After a pretty rough 2020, we were in lockdown in Melbourne for about 3 months, so we weren't allowed out after 9 o'clock, and we couldn't go more than 5 kilometers from home. So it's at 2.5 miles. So yeah, that's kind of been back under control now. There aren't too many. We haven't had any community transmission here for about 3 weeks, and haven't had any major problems. And yeah, so you can actually go to cinemas. I think they're fairly limited to the amount of people they can put in there, but you can go to the actual sit
I'll
down.
tell you something. It's really nice going to cinemas because you have to have social distancing. So those annoying bastards who chew really loudly or get their phones out and do shit, they're far away from you. It's like half capacity. It's wonderful. I love it. Please do not change that cinema.
I actually went to a gig on Friday night, live music in a theater. And it was a bit weird because you're all seated at tables. So we're not all the way back there to normal yet. But I mean, yes, you have to wear masks a lot of the time indoors, and they close borders and stuff like that. But we are lucky. We can go. And you're right. George is right. I've only seen one film since we've had to go back to the theater, and that was Tenet, which was, it
was what it was. All right. On that note, thank you so much, Andrea, for joining us. Thank you, everyone else, because we've got 4 viewers right now. I'm sure 3 of those are our bots. Do we accept immigrants?
He's an immigrant. We accepted him.
We accept them in the show, but unfortunately, we have no control over the government. But who does?
Yeah.
But we will be here, same time, same place, next week. Thank you very much. Good night.